Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
We're up to episode 70.
Episode 70. I
Yeah.
think finally we need to apply for Social Security.
Yeah, I think it's time.
We've put it off long enough.
Yeah, that's sad. The idea that people that have to work into their 70s in order to be able to get the most out of their Social Security. And
yeah.
So speaking of sadness, we're just talking about lament. Lament today.
Yeah, but who are we? That's the real question.
I mean, who are any of us? I'm Mark Van Stunick. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And I think, we've got an early comment that came in that I think is just perfect for this. So we should just start by sharing that, even though this person isn't here.
Yeah, CK writes, put that up. I will be in teletherapy during this conversation, so just let me say this. I'm angry. Everything seems to be antithetical to life. Off to therapy now. I mean,
that's great.
I'm angry too.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in a situation where we don't have to be. I think we could have solved this twice by now. And it's only getting worse in a lot of ways. I don't know. Facebook creates a bubble, right? So I'm assuming, though, that the bubble would skew towards people who generally think like me. Nevertheless, I'm seeing a lot of people, more people than I even noticed before, pushing against this sort of the liberal agenda of mask wearing and, all the cautious stuff and wanting to, go back to normal, who are pitching conspiracy theories, pandemic, that kind of stuff. I'm seeing more of that kind of crap. So I don't know if that's reality, if people are shifting that way, or if this is just the same people who've been like this the whole time, and that most of us are more rational about how to address this problem.
Right. Yeah, I think the majority of people are in the more rational camp. I think that some of the other folks are getting louder. I also think their voices are getting amplified in certain media settings. And so I think it's a both and, this is getting exhausting, right? This is getting really exhausting. And I know that I'm feeling that. I feel like everybody that I talk to is feeling that. And when you go on longer and longer in an insane situation, you start to feel like you're the one that's crazy, right? I mean, that's sort of a very classic psychological mechanism and reality that we experience. And so, the more pictures you see of, people getting out and about, hanging out with their friends, being on the beach, going to events, et cetera, you start to think, well, maybe I'm the stupid one. Why am I not doing that?
Particularly, there's even a shred of logic there. The idea is I'm not perfectly safe because of social distancing. It's just the odds are in my benefit right now. But if a bunch of these
be ever in your favor.
But if my neighbors are all living it up, or the people who go to the same Aldi that I still shop at with my mask on, if they're living it up, it's just increasing my chance. So if I'm going to get sick anyway, might as well get sick now while enjoying the good life.
Yeah.
It's we had neighbors, our neighbors, one of their housemates got COVID. And so they quarantined. And so the rest of the people in the house got tested, and they were all hoping that they were positive, so that they're now forced 2-week isolation, which they were going to do as a safety measure. They would hope it would count for something, so then they can move on with their lives. And that logic is compelling to me. It's I want to get it over with.
Yeah.
For myself anyways.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, CK, you're back.
My teletherapy's at 10:30. Yeah. Good morning, John. Glad you could catch the beginning.
We started off with your quote. With your post. Yeah. And then there's the other layer to it, which is the economic oppression layer, right? So I posted this thing the other day, and I found the responses very, very interesting. Uh, I've got a friend in Vermont, so he's my age, so his kids are young adults, and so he has a son who's a physical therapist who works at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, which is really the biggest medical center in New England outside of Boston, or one of the biggest ones. And his son was telling him that the folks that are kind of the bottom of the line staff people there, the orderlies, the people that clean, the laundry folks, all those kinds of people who are not getting adequate protection, PPE, who are not getting paid a living wage. They're all going out and partying because their attitude is like, well, look, society doesn't care about me. I'm in this very dangerous job every single day. I probably go home to some crap ass apartment, that's claustrophobic and kind of junky. And so, I'm going to have a good time with my friends. Like, I just need to blow off steam because I'm living in this really bizarre kind of nightmare. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting, the number of privileged white folks who I know are all working at home and have good jobs and have safe spaces, dumping on these people and just like basically doing the whole, the lower class is behaving immorally kind of routine, and zero understanding of like why these folks would of course behave that way. And it really reminded me of people not being able to understand why some folks vote for Trump. It was that same kind of deal. And, I completely get why these people are behaving that way. They could get sick and die any day at work. And so they're like, well, of course I'm going to go have a little bit of fun in the evening. Like, why not? Why shouldn't I?
I totally understand what you're saying. And it pisses me off when people get like, of course, I want everyone to do all the safety measure, all the things. And to me, this is a societal problem. But like where I grew up, I had all sorts of friends. Like, and I don't know exactly why I didn't end up this way because neither of my parents graduated from high school, right? And so it was common in lower income areas in rural places for people just to assume they're not going to amount to much. Like, right. Why would I? Maybe it's changed, but it used to be like, well, my brothers are fuck ups. I'm going to be a fuck up. My dad's a fuck up. Why try?
Right.
And that logic is it's like, because you feel powerless. There's not a lot you can do. There's a lot of powerlessness going around. And so it makes sense why the easy promises of someone like Trump, who's like, I don't care what people think. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. Jump on board the Trump wagon. We can ridicule those people that voted for him as being stupid, and for people who just don't care about the pandemic and just go about their lives as normal as though they're stupid. But I think we have to also acknowledge that their powerlessness is rational. Their feeling of powerlessness is rational, and we live in a society that disempowers lots of people and does not provide for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and and when it's becoming more and more obvious that there's potentially no real end in sight to this, and that, in a year or two, it's quite likely that a huge percentage of people will have gotten this illness anyway. That powerlessness creates this just sort of helpless, like, all right, well, if it's everyone for themselves, then I just might as well do whatever I want to do. And that creates this incredibly toxic erosion of social cohesion and functioning. And it's very, very problematic.
A couple of comments coming in that I think are worth sharing now.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll go back to Gus. Sinclair Media. I'm not sure. Is that a conservative media consortium? I think it is. Ran an interview with the pandemic doctor, so that's getting legitimized.
Yeah, they pulled it very quickly after they ran it, but they did run it for a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I mean, this is the thing with the Overton window and Trump being in office. All sorts of things are considered mainstream that are uncomfortable to see anything.
Maybe you should explain what an Overton window is. It's
that's a good idea.
An Anderson window.
It's less insulated. The Overton window is this idea. It's what is acceptable to talk about in public mainstream discourse. And so the Overton window, when it shifts right, that's why, like we say, oh, like Trump is saying things out loud, and people are saying things that sound fascist. Like, how can we tolerate this? It's because the Overton window has shifted right. And then people like Bernie Sanders at the same time have, because of whether you think he's actually a socialist or not, him talking about socialism publicly has made it acceptable to talk about socialism without it being just a bad word. So that shifts the Overton window to the left. And so polarization happens when the Overton window expands both directions. And there's goods and bad sides to this. But like for me personally, I want to have a leftward. I'd love to see the Overton window really just be far left and not very far right at all. Yeah. So that, because it talks about what's normal to talk about in society.
And then what happens when the uprising smashes the Overton window?
Then we live in a place without windows.
All right, let's move on.
Series writes, I am lamenting at the surge of chronically ill folks are going to occur, which inspire more health crises. That's the other thing. It's like, this isn't just about one sickness.
Well,
right? And it's to do with chewing up resources, making it less accessible. People who have pre-existing conditions more easily dying. It's just a complicating factor. It's not just don't get this disease and you'll be okay.
And also chronically ill folks as a result of COVID. I mean, we're starting to learn there seem to be chronic heart problems. It's possible that there's a certain increase in dementia. The whole thing of like, okay, either you die or you're totally fine. That's completely ridiculous. It's completely not true. You've got people that are in the ICU for 50 days, 70 days. Those people are not going to be fine when they get out of the ICU, believe me.
And even if somehow they have a full physical recovery, that amount of time, like, that's disruptive. It's like when you read reports about war casualties, how you hear about deaths, and then you have to be reminded that, there's people that were disfigured or dismembered that are more than the number of people dead. But we're not going to, at least they're alive. It doesn't matter if they have a face or not, I guess.
Right. Got a great comment from Reverend Bentley.
Good morning, Gregory. There's a sense that you want me to do what is necessary to keep you safe, but you refuse to reciprocate by supporting policy that would make my life better. So screw you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, this is a very, very basic, understandable human reaction. And what's interesting is that, the people that are trying to push their morality onto working class folks, they behave exactly the same way, right? I mean, it may be in different realms, but when they don't get what they want at a store, they're incensed, right? And I'm never coming to this store again. It's exactly the same mechanism, and this is what people do. If you don't give care to folks, they are not going to care back. It's very bizarre to me that people feign being able to understand this.
Well, and I would rather that we don't have a politics of resentment, but that's just a lot of how everything works. It's why people don't want debt forgiveness for anybody, because I had to pay off my student loans. It's why, like immigration, like I've known a lot of Latin American citizens who are not pro-immigration because they had to become citizens the hard way. That sort of thinking pervades the left and the right. So resentment keeps a lot of this ticking. So of course there's going to be resentments like, why my life is shit. You don't care about it. Why would I make things easier for you now? Let me cough into your salad. That makes sense. Series writes, and more generational trauma being passed down.
Yeah.
That's a whole other area of
absolutely
that I feel like we're only just learning about how trauma gets passed down, even epigenetically. Who knows, like the ripples. I mean, this is 2020 has been a global changing event, and we don't even know what the dominoes further down the chain are going to be like. This is kind of astonishing. Elizabeth writes, I recognize that we're trying to minimize the spread, etc., but it's difficult to inconvenience myself when there isn't a case identified in our community.
Yeah, and and to me, what this gets back to, and I just feel, I wish that this was the drumbeat that was repeated over and over again, which is that we don't need to be in the situation that we're in. And when the leadership of a society fails you, the tendency is for people to turn on each other and to also engage in this powerless, reckless behavior. There is absolutely no reason why we should not have been on top of this by now. And so then the fact that we're not frustrates people, and especially people like Liz, who live in a small town in northwest Minnesota where there has not been a single case in fertile Minnesota. And so, yeah, of course, you're like, well, what the hell? Like, why isn't my life back to normal? Why isn't this fixed? And it should be, right? But so then what happens is, because it's not, now, we're turning on each other, and we turn on teachers, and we turn on nurses, and we turn on line workers, and, and it's just all the little people below eat each other up while, the billionaires continue to make money off of the pandemic. Well, and that's, to me, what we're not emphasizing nearly enough.
Well, and we've spent trillions. The government has spent trillions now. It's about to drop more money to try to keep the economy afloat. Like, that's been the primary consideration from the government. And this whole time, like, it would have been possible to use those trillions proactively to kind of like create a system of response so that people in Fertile or Beltrami or whatever up in the north corner of Minnesota, if they don't have sickness, they have a way of tracking, like, you can keep doing your life, and then it will respond like quickly. We'll be able to adapt just like other countries did. But we didn't. And so now it's drug out. And I listened to NPR yesterday, and there's this campaign to try to get everything to shut down entirely, to finally do what we should have done in the beginning. And the person doing the interview with this woman who's leading this campaign said, well, it sounds like what you need is a federal mandate, but do you think that's going to happen? It's like, no, we have to convince all the states individually to do this. And it's like, well, what if they don't? It's like, well, then it won't work. And at this point, it makes no sense. Like, why would anybody think that we can actually do a full shutdown now at this point? It's
keep rolling.
CK writes, B.F. Skinner and being a product of your environment. You learn what you were taught, obedience, lawfulness, etc.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
People are. Yep. Laura writes, and we don't know what happens to us in 20 years after having this. There's so much we don't know about this disease and what it will cause. Elizabeth, I dislike how people tend to dismiss the chronically ill, like it's their fault if they die from COVID because they were sick to begin with. That happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's terrible.
And I know this is a little alarmist sounding, but to me, that's not a very big jump from that to these people are sickly anyways. We might as well euthanize them and incinerate their bodies, just so they're not a burden on society, which is what the Nazis did. It's that similar line of thought. Mark writes, the largest failure of leadership, in my opinion, with all this, is the failure to assure that the basic needs of U.S. citizens are being met. But we sure did take care of Wall Street and profitable corporations, as if they needed any money to make it through all of this.
Right.
That's right. The priorities are screwed up in our system.
has been happening behind the scenes. But if you want validation of this, you just look at the totally bizarre dystopian reality of the fact that the stock market has been going up even as we've had the worst economic quarter in the history of the United States.
Unemployment is huge.
Yeah. Why is that? Because all those people have been getting money shoveled at them right and left, and they're very happy.
This is. I mean, it might be good for us to sometime try to like go over what disaster capitalism is and have an episode dedicated to that, because it's an important and Gregory writes, that's why the cultivation of empathy and compassion are absolutely necessary and indispensable for a functional society. It's not just some liberal left-wing pipe dream to be regarded with scorn and contempt. This is the thing. And like, you think about churches and what they cultivate, you'd think churches, even evangelical churches, would be pushing empathy and compassion, but really the emphasis is on obedience. I mean, that's what I learned in the evangelical church, is conformity to the will of God. And that may include some empathy and compassion. But like when the chips are down, you lean into this, I have to do the right thing, and the people who do the wrong thing are on the outside of it.
Right. I mean, there's empathy and compassion for the people who are part of your in-group.
or the deserving poor, like the people who are in a bad situation, not of their own choosing. And of course, white evangelicalism blames the black community for its own problems, poor for their own problems. So very few people make it into the deserving category. Mark writes, American exceptionalism is going to kill us all and kill everybody else too. So that's
Well, although now the world has walled us off. I mean, this is another piece of the lament thing, I think. I'm really not sure that we have fully digested the reality of the fact that this is the weird thing about this wall business, right? I mean, we have created a situation where the rest of the world has walled us off. You can't go anywhere anymore. You think about, again, in Northwest Minnesota, we used to drive to Canada all the time, right? I mean, Winnipeg was our biggest, closest city. People went back and forth over the border constantly. There was a huge source of economic input for Canadians to drive down to Grand Forks, and shop at Target. You actually had like bus tours of coming to shop at Target. The Canadians would come down. And this was a real part of life that a lot of people enjoyed. It was really good. It's gone. And I don't see it coming back anytime soon. And that is a very, very weird reality that we have backed ourselves into. It's bizarre.
And just to I don't want to feed into this sort of like Chinese fear stuff, but like if you're motivated, like a lot of conservatives tend to be, to win the big economic turf battle with China's positioned itself to be able to engage in a full and open market economy by their response, whereas the United States is being forced into isolationism, which I'm sure we still can do economic trade, but it seems like it's diminished. So again, this is one of those things where it seems like the president and his ilk are doing these half-assed measures, and then like it's drawing everything out. And like you were saying earlier, if any of the stuff that, like, it's just easy for the president to blame Democrats and have people believe it, so he can blame other people for this problem while we're being bled dry. It's really a horrible situation we're in.
And it really is, and this, Gregory, what you're talking about is so important, because one of the defining qualities of narcissism is that you have no empathy or compassion, right? And our society is becoming more and more toxically narcissistic, and there's a direct correlation between that and the decline in the ability to be empathetic and compassionate, which also then is a decline in the ability to do anything positive for the collective. right? As you said, Mark, the bizarre thing is we could have spent probably, I don't know, 10% of the money we spent right now and gotten up a good public health epidemiological response to this, and we would be done. Like we would all be, back to work, back to normal. And instead, what the narcissists have done is enrich themselves to the tune of billions of dollars and screwed everybody else. And that is a tragedy of enormous proportions.
No, I'm an anarchist, so I'm never excited about saying things like this. But why not activate the National Guard to create a field, to create an infrastructure for testing and tracking, and then have universal healthcare? If we would have done those two things, think of how amazing, better off our society would be now, but then also in the future, being able to provide for needs like that. And we didn't. And so I feel all sorts of anger. And this, and just to get to Julia's point in a second, I think it's important. But Elizabeth Wright said, definitely. And I really hate that they have us policing each other. Right. I think that's on purpose. I think that's part of the tactic. Yeah, people are calling in businesses for not social distancing, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it accentuates that rats in the eating each other in the drowning ship phenomenon.
Lobsters in the bucket.
Yeah, lobsters in the bucket.
It's a little Jordan Peterson reference.
Yeah.
Here's a good point from Julia, and I think we need to spend a little time on this. So many don't know how to grieve, and I worry how much more emotionally dysfunctional it's going to get out there. This is a huge point because, you think about American society, and we don't have collective grief rituals. Like right now, people can't go to funerals. They're not going to church, or they shouldn't be. And so the mechanisms we have for public lament aren't there. And let's be honest, funerals aren't what they used to be.
I was going to say those rituals were not very solid to begin with.
And very few churches practice public lament as a spiritual practice anyway. So what little we had has been taken from us. And so, I think we're kind of screwed. We have to be able to process these heavy feelings, and we're a society that struggles with that. We're told that you shouldn't complain because it breeds negativity, right? So we virtualize the idea of being positive and not complaining about things. Lament requires aggressive complaint, and also evangelical culture tells us that we shouldn't question God. But if you read the prophetic lament literature in the scriptures, people are saying, fuck you, God, all the time, right? So we've cut ourselves off. Our spirituality, American spirituality, is cut off from being able to do lament well. And we need to be able to grieve deep, heavy, and collectively in order to be emotionally healthy in the midst of all this.
Yeah, and so there's that, and then the other phenomenon about grief, and the thing about grief is that it's very hard to give yourself the space to grieve when there is no end to the thing that is creating the loss, right? So when somebody dies, you then can create the space. They've died, they're gone, you can grieve. It's very hard in the midst of a seemingly endless kind of nightmare to create the space to grieve, because you've got to keep going. Right, you have to keep functioning, and so that makes it even more challenging when added to the reality that we don't know how to do it to begin with.
The most clear example I've seen of grief done in ways that are helpful is the George Floyd Memorial area, which is a form of grief. There's celebration, but there's always celebration in grief, And even that, right now we're hearing things just to jump over to the protests. The way the president's been handling protests, Biden saying that he's going to round up anarchists, people telling protesters,
stop talking, Joe. Stop talking.
people telling people in Portland saying, okay, we're going to let you out of jail, but you can't protest anymore. Like, so you have to get rid of your First Amendment rights. To me, these protests are also collective lament in a way that, I mean, this is maybe the best way our society is doing this right now, and that's being cut off from us and being criminalized.
All right, so we're about at time. Why don't we roll through our last comments, which are all really good.
Mark writes, we don't grieve well in the USA because we are indoctrinated to believe that grief is a failure emotion. That's totally right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Julie writes, our public grief rituals have been downgraded to mere window dressing. Mm-hmm. Yes, very antiseptic, very beige.
Very quick, very quick.
Yeah, I hate going to funerals because they're just always surfacey, the way they've been recreated in our economic system. Sirius writes, it is hilarious and obscene that setting up a federal mandate of public health is what led far-right and conservatives to start questioning the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
Hilarious and obscene is a good way of describing that.
Yes.
Elizabeth writes, not being able to publicly grieve keeps us from experiencing the compassion and empathy towards others. Amen. It's Al's seems to minimize the impact of COVID. It all seems to minimize the impact of COVID. Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
And so it keeps us disassociated.
Yeah.
Or encourages disassociation when we can't grieve well. Leah writes, I think the problem is that I'm not grieving at all of what was lost. The old normal, what I'm grieving is the new normal, is dystopian and oppressive. That's right, because we're still in the middle of it. So we're grieving the harm we're experiencing. We haven't even been able to give a chance to, like, I talk to friends like, remember in the before time when we used to do karaoke? So it still feels like we haven't, I feel like I have to move past this place to the other side before I can even grieve what I lost. So we're all.
That's what I was just saying about the end. There's no end. You can't grieve when there's no end.
Sirius writes, grief is a body response to repair attachment after loss and death. That's right. We need to be able to feel the limit in our bodies. It grieves me that we should be able to make connections between our current situation and the ways in which our military has degraded and deprived the lives of so many around the world, but we simply refuse to do so. That's right. Julie writes, we need grief doulas. I function as one these days. Yes. Yeah. It's a very priestly task that has been lost, that needs to be regained. And I think you're absolutely right, Julia. Laura writes, my father died of cancer 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
3 days bereavement time is all that is offered. Almost always the case in the U.S.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're supposed to get over it and get back to work.
It's amazing when you read in literature.
It's insane.
And I get that this is usually in literature, they're usually featuring characters that are part of the nobility or affluent. So this is skewed. But it's amazing when you read stuff from like when there'd be a widow and she'd be wearing black for like 2 months because she's still in mourning. Like you always read that and it seems like such a foreign idea because we don't give any time to grieve.
Right.
Gus writes, the last few Christian funerals I've been to have been but we do not mourn. It's awful. It's just denial.
Yeah, we do not mourn at a funeral. Oh, gosh. Yes. So, all right. Well, thank you for all the wonderful comments. You all make the show, as we say, and we really appreciate it. And and this is good. We're in a really challenged state right now, and so we need to support each other and all of that. So thanks for being here and supporting us, and it's great to hear from you all.
And we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.